My husband was a master manipulator. Every time I caught him cheating, he'd cry, apologize, swear he'd change. Then I got an anonymous email, check room 508. I rushed to the hotel and knocked. A woman opened the door, wearing my husband's shirt. Behind her, 2 other women sat on the bed. They looked at each other, then back at me. One whispered, "You're his wife?" My husband walked out of the bathroom and nearly fainted. But his nightmare was just beginning. I, female 39, never thought I'd end up writing something like this. I've lurked on this subreddit for years, read the horror stories, the betrayals, the lies, and thought, thank God that's not my life. Until it was. I've been married to Mark, male 42, for 12 years. We have 2 kids, a nice house in the Chicago suburbs, steady jobs. He works in commercial real estate. I'm a speech therapist at a local school. From the outside, our life looked stable. Normal. Happy even. I thought we had something real. But I was wrong for a long time. Very, very wrong. The first time I caught Mark cheating was 5 years ago. I was doing laundry when his phone buzzed on the counter. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I glanced at the screen and saw a message pop up from someone saved as Jessica. The message said, "Last night was amazing. When can we do it again?" I froze. I opened the thread. There were weeks, maybe months, of texts. Flirting, photos, some of them explicit. Plans to meet. Mark had been sleeping with her and hiding it in plain sight. I confronted him that night. He cried. I mean full-on sobbing. Dropping to his knees, snot running down his face. He swore it was a mistake, said it meant nothing, and that he was so ashamed. I was furious, heartbroken, but I had 2 little kids sleeping upstairs. And Mark was so convincing. He said he'd cut contact. He even blocked her in front of me. He asked for therapy. We went. I forgave him. Things were better for a while. He was more present. More attentive. Bought flowers for no reason. Started texting me good morning and how's your day going, like we were dating again. I started to believe in him again. I felt stupid for being paranoid. I thought maybe we just hit a rough patch. Then, 2 years later, it happened again. This time, it was Rachel. A personal trainer from the gym he joined. I saw a charge from some boutique hotel in the city on our joint credit card. When I asked him about it, he said it was for a team building retreat. But it didn't sit right. So I did what I had never done before, I followed him. He said he had a late showing downtown. I waited, parked across the street from the address he gave me. He never showed up. I tracked the location from his phone using the Find My app he forgot I had access to. He was 3 blocks away, at a hotel. I didn't confront him right then. I waited. I watched. And when I saw him walking out of the hotel, arm in arm with Rachel, I felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just went home. That night, I put the kids to bed, sat at the kitchen table, and told him what I knew. He tried to lie at first. Said it was just dinner. I told him I saw them together. He broke down again. Same tears. Same begging. Same promises. I should have left. I know. I know. But he kept saying, I'm broken. You're the only one who makes me feel whole. And I was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of feeling like a failure. Tired of trying to hold a family together alone. I stayed. Again. Fast forward to 6 months ago. Things felt off. He was coming home later. He was glued to his phone. He changed his passcode. Said it was for security at work. The affection he gave me after the second incident faded. It was like he was going through the motions. I started to feel invisible in my own marriage. Then one afternoon, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. Just 4 words, check room 508. That's all. No explanation. No name. Nothing. I stared at it for a long time. My heart was pounding. I knew it wasn't spam. It felt personal. I started panicking. Room 508, where? A hotel? I thought maybe it was a sick prank. But something in my gut screamed this is real. Room 508. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe him alone, maybe with one woman. Maybe even nothing. But nothing prepared me for what I saw. I knocked. Lightly at first, then louder. A woman opened the door. She was wearing one of Mark's white button-down shirts. My shirt. The one I had ironed for him last week. She looked confused, then surprised. Behind her, I saw 2 other women. Both in bed. Sheets pulled up to their chests. One was drinking wine straight from the bottle. The other stared at me with wide eyes. I stood there, dripping wet, and just said, "Is Mark here?" One of them whispered, "You're his wife?" That's when he walked out of the bathroom. Wet hair. Towel around his waist. And when he saw me, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He said my name once, just once. And then silence. His mouth hung open. The other women were dead quiet. And I laughed. Not because it was funny. But because it was the only thing my body could do. I laughed like I had lost my mind. Like I'd stepped out of my life and into some sick, twisted movie. Mark started stammering. "It's not what it looks like." "Really?" I said, "You know what? Don't even say it. I don't need another fake apology. I don't want to hear you cry. I don't care what your excuse is." Then I turned to the woman in the shirt and said, "You can keep it." And I walked away. I didn't go home right away. I drove around the city for hours. I didn't cry. Not yet. I felt numb. Hollow. My brain kept replaying what I saw. 3 women. In a hotel room. My husband, in a towel, looking like a deer in headlights. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. At some point, I ended up in a parking lot near the lake. Just sat there, engine running, staring at nothing. That's when my phone started blowing up. Missed calls. Texts. From Mark. "Mark, please. I can explain. Mark, don't do anything rash. Mark, come home. Let's talk. Mark, the kids need both of us." And then, "Mark, you're being dramatic. Don't ruin everything over a mistake." A mistake? 3 women in one room was not a mistake. It was a lifestyle. That word, dramatic, snapped something in me. Like he still thought he had power. Like I was the one making things worse. I blocked his number. Then I remembered something, those women. Their faces. One of them looked young. Like, barely legal. I felt sick again. I made an anonymous tip to the hotel's front desk, just in case. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't thinking straight. When I finally got home, the house was dark. The kids were asleep. I didn't turn on any lights. I went to the guest room, shut the door, and curled up under a blanket. That's where I stayed until morning. The next day, Mark was in the kitchen making breakfast like nothing happened. He acted normal. Asked if I wanted eggs. I stared at him. "You seriously think we're just going to pretend last night didn't happen?" He looked up slowly. "We can work through this, Sarah. We always do. Always. Like this was our routine." I said, "You need to leave." He dropped the spatula. "What?" "You heard me. Pack your stuff. Get out." He tried to argue. Told me this was his house too, that we needed to think about the kids. I told him the only thing he needed to think about was which hotel he'd check into without company. Eventually, he left. But not without slamming a few doors and calling me cold. I didn't feel cold. I felt free. Or so I thought. 2 days later, I got another anonymous message. This time, it wasn't from email. It was a man's voice on a burner phone. Just thought you should know, Mark's been lying about more than just women. Click. That's it. I tried calling the number back, dead line. I had no idea who it was. But my heart sank. What else was he hiding? That night, I logged into our shared online accounts. Bank statements. Credit cards. I dug deeper. That's when I found it. There were payments made under a business name I didn't recognize, Wellspring Consulting. Monthly, regular withdrawals. Thousands of dollars. I looked it up. No website. No office. No reviews. But after some digging, I found a Reddit post from last year. A woman described her husband funneling money into a fake business to hide gambling debts. I felt my stomach drop. I went back through our finances. Mark had taken out 2 credit cards I didn't know about. Maxed out. Personal loans in his name. A line of credit tied to our house. Carla, I've been seeing him for 7 months. He told me he was divorced. That you were unstable. He met my kids. Carla, he took us to Great Wolf Lodge. Said he wanted to be a family with me. I sat there in shock. I asked her to send me pictures. She did. There was Mark, smiling, holding Carla's youngest. Kissing her cheek in a restaurant. Lying in a hammock next to her boys. He looked happy. Like a man living a second life. I replied, he's still married. He lives here. With me. Until last week. Carla went silent. 5 minutes later, she sent one more message. Carla, he told me you were violent. That you hit him. That's why he left. I felt like I was going to throw up. This man. My husband. The father of my children. Had painted me as abusive. While he played house with another woman and her kids. Carla and I ended up on the phone for an hour. She was devastated. Angry. Embarrassed. She had no idea. We both cried. Then she said something that stuck with me, he's not just a cheater. He's dangerous. I didn't want to believe it before. But now I did. This wasn't just about sex. It was about control. About lies stacked so high he couldn't remember what was true anymore. I've since heard from 2 more women. Same story. Different details. He used fake names. Fake jobs. Told one woman he was widowed. Told another he was a traveling consultant. Always some excuse for not staying the night. Always some tragedy in his past that explained why he was guarded. He was running multiple lives. I've got screenshots, messages, voice memos. I started a folder. I labeled it Truth. I don't know how deep this goes yet. But I'm not stopping. He messed with the wrong woman. It had been a week since I kicked Mark out. I had spoken to 3 women by now. Carla was the one who really opened the floodgates, but after she and I shared screenshots and posted about him in a few closed Facebook groups, the dam broke. More messages started pouring in. One woman, Nina, said she dated Mark for over a year. She lived in Naperville, about 40 minutes from me. She had no idea he was married. He'd tell her he was out of town for business every time he had to come home to me. Then there was Amanda, a paralegal from Oak Park. She recognized him immediately after Carla's post went semi-viral in a local Single Moms of Illinois group. She said he told her his wife had died from cancer. Showed her a photo of me, one I took with the kids, and said it was his late wife and how he was still grieving. She believed him. I was starting to see it clearly now. Mark wasn't just a cheater. He was a compulsive con artist. And then something else happened. I got an email. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from a woman named Diane, and she said, "I think you need to know who he really is." She asked to meet in person. I was hesitant. But she said she had proof, documents, records, things I needed to see. So we met at a little cafe in Wicker Park. I brought a friend just in case. Diane was in her mid-50s. Calm. Serious. Not dramatic. She slid a file folder across the table to me and said, "I used to be married to him too." My stomach dropped. She had been married to Mark before me. He told me he had one short marriage in his early 20s that ended quickly. That's it. No. Diane said they were married for 5 years. He had been arrested. Convicted. Fined. But the records were sealed after some deal with the court. He never spent time in prison. That's why nothing ever showed up in the background checks I did before we married. I felt like my skin was on fire. He lied about his past. He lied about everything. Diane leaned forward. He'll keep doing this until someone stops him. I left that meeting with my hands shaking. I couldn't go home. I drove to a nearby park, sat on a bench, and just stared into space. How many lives had he destroyed? That night, I started calling financial institutions. I froze every account with my name on it. Put alerts on my credit. Pulled every credit report I could. And that's when I found another surprise. There was a storage unit rented under our old address. One I had never seen or visited. Paid for monthly, $185. From our joint account. The next morning, I went to check it out. I brought my brother with me. The unit was filled with boxes. Dozens. Labeled with names I didn't recognize. Paperwork. Fake IDs. Burner phones. Even notebooks with women's names, dates, little notes like likes red wine, allergic to shellfish, kids equals 2, ages 4+6. It was like a serial killer's playbook, but for cheating. There were scripts. Handwritten and typed. Like a con man preparing for a role. Lines he used on women. Timelines. He had been planning everything. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about sex or excitement. Mark had studied us. Every woman. Every move. It was all calculated. It was him. Disheveled. Crying. Holding flowers like a bad movie cliché. He mouthed please. I didn't open the door. I turned on the porch light and said, through the door, "Go away. Or I call the police." He dropped the flowers. Sat on the porch. Started yelling. About the kids. About second chances. About how I was blowing things out of proportion. I called the cops. They showed up. He left, but not without drama. Said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "She's ruining our family over gossip." That night, I started sleeping with the doors double locked and a baseball bat next to my bed. The next morning, a woman named Danielle messaged me on Instagram. She said she met Mark on a business flight. 6 months ago. He told her his name was Matt, claimed he was divorced. Lived alone. Worked in energy consulting. He had been flying out to visit her in Atlanta every few weeks. You know what she sent me? A picture of him proposing to her. With a ring. They were engaged. I didn't even know how to process that. Danielle said she said yes, but things felt weird recently. He was less available. She found his real name on a pharmacy prescription he left at her house. She Googled it. Found everything. And now she wanted to help take him down. 3 weeks after Danielle sent me the engagement photo, we made a plan. Carla, Danielle, and I decided enough was enough. No more quiet suffering. no more private heartbreak. If Mark wanted to build lies in public, we were going to destroy them the same way. He said yes, of course. Probably thrilled to get another free meal on someone else's emotional tab. What he didn't know was that Carla and I would be there too. And so would Nina. And Amanda. And Diane. We reserved the booth behind him. A round table with a clear view of where he'd sit. Danielle would give us the signal. We were all trembling. Angry. Scared. Heart-pounding anxious. At 7:13 p.m., Danielle texted the group chat, "He's here. Just sat down. Wearing blue." I saw him through the decorative divider. Hair slicked back. That same fake smile. Still playing the role of the loving fiancé. He reached for Danielle's hand across the table. And that's when she stood up. She didn't sit back down. She looked him in the eye and said, loud and clear, "You're a liar. And I'm not alone." Mark froze. We stood up, one by one, and walked around the divider. His face turned pale. Then red. Then blank. Carla dropped a stack of printed screenshots onto the table. "Remember these?" she asked. Nina held up a photo from the storage unit, the one with him and 3 women, none of whom were us. Amanda said, "Still claiming your wife died?" Diane just laughed. "Guess you haven't changed since 2007. The whole restaurant had gone quiet. Heads were turning. Forks stopped clinking. I think a waiter dropped a glass. Mark looked like he couldn't decide whether to run or beg. He said my name, Sarah, like it was his only lifeline. But I didn't flinch. I said, "You don't get to speak to me." He stood up suddenly, hands shaking. "You don't understand. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Danielle scoffed. "You proposed to me last week. And you have 2 kids at home. You meant every second." "None of this was real," he shouted. "You don't know what it's like to need love so bad you make it up." The entire room heard it. Some people gasped. Others looked at him like he was trash. A man at the next table muttered, "Jesus Christ." "I loved all of you," Mark said, almost whispering now. "In different ways. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." "You ruined people," Carla snapped. "You stole from me," I added. "And from our kids." He tried to walk out. Danielle stepped in his path. "You don't get to leave before we're done." He sat down, head in his hands. I don't know if it was guilt, shame, or the sudden realization that he had lost control of everything. That was the moment. When the mask finally dropped. He cried, not the manipulative tears I'd seen before. This was different. Sloppy. Humiliating. He wasn't sad. He was exposed. And he knew it. I left first. I couldn't stand to look at him anymore. My chest hurt. My head was spinning. As I walked past the bar, the hostess whispered to her coworker, "That was his wife? He proposed to the other one?" I went outside, leaned against a street lamp, and took a breath. One deep, cold breath. The other women followed me out slowly, one by one. Some hugged. Some cried. We shared phone numbers. We said goodbye. But no one said, "He'll change." Because we all knew better now. The next few weeks were a blur. Mark tried contacting me again. Letters. Emails. Even voicemail through a burner number. Apologies. Promises to go to rehab. Offers to sign anything I wanted. I gave it all to my lawyer. He was served with divorce papers 3 days later. The kids asked where Daddy went. I told them he was sick and needed help. I didn't lie. But I didn't give them the whole story either. Not yet. Carla and I kept talking. So did Danielle. We supported each other. There was comfort in knowing I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. My parents were shocked but supportive. My brother offered to help pay for a private investigator if I wanted to go after him criminally. I thought about it. But in the end, I just wanted peace. Mark's house of lies collapsed in one night. But mine? Mine took years to build and years to question. And it only took a single email to shake the entire thing down. Check room 508. I've thought about those words a lot. Whoever sent that message saved me. I've since gone back to therapy. I started journaling again. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I printed out a fresh copy of my kids' baby photos and hung them in the hallway. Reclaiming space, one corner at a time. Do I still feel angry? Yes. Some nights I still wake up sweating. My brain replays everything like a movie I didn't audition for. But I also feel something I haven't in a long time, relief. Because I'm not waiting for the next lie anymore. I don't know what the future holds. I'm not rushing into anything. But I'm finally learning to be okay with being alone, instead of being broken with someone else. If you're reading this and you feel that sinking feeling, that something isn't right, please listen to it. You're not crazy. You're probably just one email away from the truth. And when you find it, stand up. Speak up. And walk away.